This is a quick look at the Toshiba NB205. This is a netbook that I started using shortly after the launch of Windows 7. I got it specifically to use Windows 7, and I've been pretty impressed with the battery life and the overall use of it as well. It's a nice device, works really well, and thought we'd take a little bit of a tour around it. It gets huge battery life in large part because of this oversized battery here. I think it's a 6-cell battery. It juts out of the back, which isn't all that great, but the battery life is superb, is absolutely superb. If we take a look at the netbook itself, what we see is an SD slot right here, and over here indicators for all the drive and the Wi-Fi and all of that. Right here, easy to see, but basically a clean front except for the slot for the SD card. Really nice to have this, and to have it on the front actually works really well. I found it very, very useful. If we go on this side, you've got a VGA port, a fan, which actually doesn't kick on a lot for me. I'll explain why in a second. You've got headphone and microphone. You've got an Ethernet port, and you've got one powered USB port. More on this in 1 second as well. Going to the back, you've got the ugly, bulky battery that pushes out. And then on the other side, you have Kensington lock slot. You've got the AC, place for the AC adapter, and then 2 more USB ports. What's really interesting about this USB port, and it's the case on both of the Toshiba notebooks that I've been using over the last week, is that this can be configured using some software to charge a device even when the computer's off, which is a really nice solution. I have set it up so that if I'm running low on battery for my camera or for my iPhone, I can actually plug in the cord and it'll use this battery to charge the device, even though the netbook is off. That's a pretty nice feature. If we open up the netbook, it has a very nice trackpad. It's smooth, but it actually works fairly well. And it's got mouse buttons down here, left, right click. It actually works quite well. Island keyboards, very comfortable to type on. Exceptionally comfortable to type on. Really like this keyboard. I thought the HP Mini was the best keyboard that I had used on a netbook. This is up there. They're very different in feel, but this works really quite well. The power button is right here, and the screen is quite nice. Let's see what happens when we boot it up, and you'll see it actually goes pretty quickly. It came with Windows 7 Starter Edition. I had a little bit of an accident and ended up having to actually get a copy of Windows 7 Home Premium, and that's actually what's loaded on here now. This is resuming. It actually resumes very quickly, very, very quickly. And you can see it. The screen is quite nice. I have Dragon loaded on here. I did a demo of it the other day, and Dragon actually works rather well on here. It's not as fast as I'd like it to be, but it's a netbook. It's got a 1.6 single core processor. It's not going to be a speed unit. I wasn't satisfied with the typical netbook features on this particular machine, so I did a little surgery shortly after getting it. One of the nice things about this Toshiba is that actually they make it very easy to modify the device. So for instance, it comes with 1 GB of RAM, which is typical for a netbook. And I think the ones that came with XP, I don't know if it holds with Vista or with 7, but you can only have 1 GB of RAM in the machine. But with one screw, you actually are able to access the RAM slot, and I actually put in a 2 GB RAM chip of DDR2 800 MHz RAM. Makes a huge difference, and it's this easy. It's one screw, pop it in, pop in the new RAM, place back the door, Screw it back down. And now you've got a machine that has 2 gigabytes of RAM. Big, big difference, especially if you're doing something like running Dragon. The other thing that I did is, if we go over here, replacing the hard drive is actually quite easy as well. It's 2 screws. You actually need a different wrench, but it's just 2 simple screws. It came with a 160 gigabyte spinning platter drive at 5400 RPM, but I simply took those 2 screws out, removed the door, and I put in a 32 gigabyte SSD drive. The result, it was very easy. You just literally, you pull it out and you put it back in, and then you simply load back on the software, and it really was an incredibly simple process. Anybody who's scared of opening up their machines, don't be, although you should do something that I didn't do, which is to discharge any static electricity. But by putting in 2 gigabytes of RAM and the SSD drive, this thing is pretty darn fast now, particularly considering the fact that it's got a rather anemic processor. The trade-off is really quite good though, because I get enough speed to use Dragon, to do plenty of web browsing. I don't find that it's slowing down and locking up. I really don't. And I get 7, 8, I think up to 9 hours worth of battery life. This is actually probably the device that I'm going to be taking with me when we go to CES, just because having it there, being able to use Dragon Naturally Speaking, and not having to worry too much about battery life will be a real pleasure when we're running from place to place on those busy days. So this is a quick look at the Toshiba NB205. Certainly not the slimmest netbook that you're going to find. It's certainly not the most stylish, but it feels solid, works great, startup and hibernate time really fast, runs Windows 7 like a dream. Really nice netbook. This actually is one that I'm going to be keeping around for a little while.